Well, let's go ahead and again, hello, everybody. My name is Denise Harlow. I'm CEO of the National Community Action Partnership, and thank you for being with us here today. Um, the partnership NCAP, we have done a series of webinars over the last couple of months. We've done a few toolkits. We've been pushing out information in light of some of the interesting and challenging financial times we find ourselves, right? The unpredictable uncertainty that we find ourselves in right now. And so Wipfli has been a long-standing great partner to NCAP. They were a diamond sponsor for the 60th anniversary year. They've stepped up again this year and have been aligned with us in so many different ways over the years. And for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on organization or organizing our organization's finances, right? And I like the word dynamic. Maybe that's better than challenging or unpredictable. That is certainly the way to describe it, a dynamic environment. I'm going to turn this over here in a moment. I just want to say our primary speaker today, Catherine Eilers. Many of you will know Catherine from, if you have gone to Wipfli's conferences and events in the past. Catherine is a great resource when it comes to governmental funding practices, rules, regulations, the how-tos, the best practices. So we're thrilled, Catherine, that you're with us here today. But I'll let Ryan do a full blown introduction. And certainly Ryan Peasley is a partner at Wipfli, and Ryan has been a great colleague to work with on this webinar and previous ones and toolkits and all that sort of thing. So again, Ryan, thank you to Wipfli. Thank you to you. We appreciate your partnership, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Denise, and thank you to the network for having us on another webinar here in just a week. The last one we did was really around the HR topics and kind of how that changes with the various dynamic times that are here. Today, we're going to talk about that fiscal side of the house. I, by no means, am the expert there. That's why we brought Catherine in for that piece. But I do lead the group here at Wipfli that works with numerous community action agencies throughout the nation. And so oversee a lot of the services we provide and strategies that we provide organizations, from the list of items that Catherine has up there, from strategic planning, cybersecurity, making better data decisions, leadership development. All of those different areas are where we've been helping organizations. We've got a couple QR codes there to bring us to areas where you can reach out to us and get our contact information should that happen. And then a little bit of housekeeping as we go through these topics here today. Be sure to just ask your questions either in the Q&A panel or even just out loud in the chat area here. We certainly want to tailor this conversation to you and organizations, to you and your organizations, and things that you're going through now. We have prepared some materials to walk through, but certainly ask any questions as we go through, and we'll be happy to cover them. I'll pass it over to Catherine to do a brief info of herself, and we get into the content.
Yes, so thank you. I appreciate being here with you today, and it's always a great opportunity to get a chance to connect with you and be part of sharing information that we can. And as part of this, of course, as Ryan said, we as Wipfli do provide a breadth of services, and we also provide and hopefully are able to share with all of you if you've been able to attend. We do like to do and provide training and learning opportunities around grant regulations and those such as uniform guidance, and then the financial best practices, internal controls. So please feel free to, like Ryan said, reach out to us if you have any questions about any of those concerns around regulations, controls, financial best practices, because we are seeing a lot of scrutiny around that. Feel free to reach out to us also about any of our training opportunities as well. But for the in essence of time, we're going to talk about the state of our compliance today and looking at how we can optimize things in a dynamic environment, like Denise said. So we are in the essence of looking at some of those. We've got some information to share, but that combined with any questions that you might have, again, we're happy to pause and stop whenever you may have a question so we could talk about it in the moment and address that. But that also then combined with 1 hour of time, we're going to provide as much information as we can in that brief amount of time. I would love to say you're going to walk away with a brand new updated process. However, we only have 1 hour together. So let's kind of get into that. I thought what we could do is maybe pause here for just a moment and think about what is the current financial landscape of our organization and what are some of the current things that we are facing. Things have been changing pretty rapidly and quickly, unexpectedly as well in many instances and cases. So with current things that we are seeing, please feel free to share in the chat, maybe any instances or things that you are seeing as well. And then, of course, my colleagues on the call here or on the session, please jump in as you feel you would like to as well. But some of the current things that we are seeing and experiencing that grant-funded agencies are sharing with us include some of the questions and the scrutiny around the expenses and the drawdowns of our funds and justifying why we need the money and providing more information. We're also seeing some additional questions and concerns around internal controls, some of the fundamentals around our grant compliance as well. A lot of questions and a little bit of an upswing in some of the inquiries around policies and procedures, because those are, as I like to say whenever we're presenting or talking about those with agencies, is those are your internal regulations. And so making sure that those are up to date, that they are in compliance with the regulations and the funder standards and requirements that we need to follow, and that we have good internal controls, we have updated risk assessments to support the internal control processes that we have in place, and that we have our documentation is in line and it's solid so that we can justify and support the expenses that we are incurring for our programs and that we're asking the grants to reimburse us for, so that we can continue to help our communities and serve our families and the individuals that come to us for services. I know then also there's an additional or more concern around cybersecurity. Ryan can speak a little bit more to this, but we did see that with the uniform guidance updates and those regulations that took effect back in October, that they have added cybersecurity to the regulations because we are doing more things on the in electronic format, but then also in the cloud, and having controlled or security around the access to our data and information to make sure that that is structured well. That's part of our internal control regulation now. So I don't know, Ryan, if you would like to add anything to that or share any other information of what you're seeing there as well.
I'd just say that organizations probably haven't seen a lot of documentation around this or too much unless they're in reading the regs. The area where you probably will see it is on your next fiscal audit. Your auditor is going to probably ask some cybersecurity related questions. You probably are already getting those questions from your cybersecurity insurance provider. So if you're able to answer those questions pretty good, I think you'll be okay from the audit side, but not everybody has cybersecurity insurance or really are checking the right boxes on the cybersecurity insurance application. So if you've got questions on any of that stuff, certainly reach out to whoever you work with as a cybersecurity provider, or you have could reach out to us or NCAP, on who they might recommend you work with.
Okay, so what we thought we would cover or talk with you about today is just some of the challenges that we are facing in regards to the fluctuations that we may be experiencing with our financing. Now, financing includes the revenue that comes in, and as grant-funded organizations, grant funding is a significant part of the revenue that comes in. So when we are looking at some of those challenges around the swings or maybe the rollback on some of the funding that we're receiving, these are just some of the challenges that we are facing. There are, of course, many more that we are certain you are facing as well in your organization. So just a few of these here are, of course, budget revisions. You know, we have to report budget variations or deviations from our approved budget. So whenever we have significant changes, we need to make sure that we are following uniform guidance and reporting those deviations from the project or even the budgeting, the project scope, right? And getting the prior approval from our funders for any significant changes that need to be made. So if we're receiving less money than what was anticipated, we might need to make a budget revision and reduce expenses or reallocate money to different cost categories. And that might trigger that prior approval or that written approval from our funder. We also have concerns around liquidity management and cash flow management. Now, liquidity is a little different than cash flow or cash management. With liquidity, this is where we're making sure we have liquid assets to meet those short-term obligations. So cash reserves to cover those expenses and contingencies. So this is something that we've been planning for. We might have had those reserves in place. Some reserves, maybe not any, right? We may not have any reserves, but then that leads to the cash flow management or cash flow or cash management, where we're focused more on the timing and the movement of the cash. So managing the inflow and outflows to make sure that we can meet our financial obligations when they come due so that we can pay our staff their wage, we can pay for their employee benefits, we can pay our vendors and our contractors. So making sure that we're monitoring the cash management aspect that includes that forecasting and budgeting piece to anticipate, are we going to have a shortfall? What are the expected cash needs for the next 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, right? With contingency planning, this is where we are establishing and documenting if there are any contingency funding plans to help us address any of those liquidity shortfalls or cash flow issues. So if we're looking at making sure that we've got those plans in place, that's going to affect that forecasting piece as well. So these are all relating to each other, right? With cost allocation, we also want to make sure that we're allocating costs appropriately to the different programs and activities, looking to comply with what the regulations allow and what our cost policy says, our cost allocation policy, so that we're complying with our internal regulations. And if we are being affected by the changes that are leading us to reducing or kind of pulling back or perhaps closing a program that is going to affect our cost allocation process or method. Also looking to see if there is an upswing in services that we may need to address to help accommodate additional needs from our community. So if our program is also expanding, we would need to revisit and make sure that our cost allocation plan is still appropriate for us. It doesn't always mean that we have to make changes to the plan, but we do certainly need to monitor it and make sure that it still supports what our needs are, that it is still reflective of our current activity and our current state as we're serving our families and our community. We also are looking at any fluctuations in staffing. So if we need to reduce staff or reassign employees to different positions or roles, what is the effect on that as we're looking to forecast and make projections for the changes in the different programs or services that we're offering? We want to be monitoring to see if we have vacancies. Did that result in an excess or a budget that's not going to amount that's not going to be spent? And should we be evaluating moving that unspent or that available budget to another cost category so we can better leverage those funds to serve the community and serve our families that are coming in. Also, communicating with the board. We still need to keep our board and our governing body informed about the changes in funding and programs. What is the impact on our operations? So your board or your finance committee or both might need you to provide revised budgets, forecasts, those contingency plans to make sure that they understand the financial situation that's occurring. That's also in line with the regulations to make sure that they are monitoring and reporting and understand program and financial performance of the organization. And then being able to provide that reporting to them quickly, because it could change from month to month, right? And then, of course, that catch-all, it's kind of like that last item on our job description, the other. What is the other? That's such a wide basket of things to catch there, but that might be, again, maintaining compliance with your regulations and your internal controls. If you got your current risk assessments in place, you've evaluated your policies, you've updated things to align with the new uniform guidance regulations for the new funding that's coming into your organization after October 1st, and you've looked at your processes and internal controls, you may be in a good position. So you just want to make sure you're maintaining that then. That you're also understanding what are the expectations of the budget leaders in your organization so that they can help not just provide answers to the board if they have them, but in the advisory councils or the policy councils, but then also best address what the community needs when they're coming in for services. So it is a wide range of things that we're facing, some of which are not even listed here, right? So anything that you wanted to add or address here as well, I guess I'll open it up to others. Whoops, didn't mean to do that, pardon me. Okay. Well, I don't think I need to say this. This is certainly not something that is going to be a surprise, but yes, it is important for us to be flexible and understand how we can quickly pivot and adjust for things. So being flexible it's almost like always having to kind of balance yourself on a moving boat, and hopefully able to just steady yourself so that when that wave comes, you can accommodate for it. But being flexible is more than just keeping our sea legs, right? It is also allowing you to adjust what your strategies are for addressing the situation that comes up, adapting to funding changes. So if there's a sudden decrease in a particular funding source in one area, but an increase in a local grant or a foundational grant that's being made available to your organization, we need to be able to quickly accommodate that and adjust and be flexible for that to revise our budgets and our reporting. If we need to make adjustments to expenses, what are the cost categories in the current state of those in regards to revenues and expenses? Being able to provide reporting in a real-time situation so that your budget leaders can pull the reports and know every day when they log onto their computer, they can pull up their reporting dashboard or pull their reports so they know that day, here's where we are, here's what happened, up to this point, so that they can make sure that they are still, again, addressing any changes that they need to make for their programs. Being flexible also means watching to see what changes may occur with the regulations. So staying up to date on the federal regulations, for example, going through the trainings to learn what the new 2024 updates were for uniform guidance. For those of us that receive HHS funding, understanding how DHHS has adopted the 2024 updates. Understanding that the grants policy statement also was updated, and they made some edits to it, and we published it last week. So last week they did make some changes to that. So those items help govern our grants, and we need to make sure that we are we're watching for those so that we can make our team available or let them know about those changes and provide that so that they can be flexible and quickly implement those changes into their day-to-day. And then, of course, being flexible to address our community needs, because that is changing as well. And seeing how what we're providing today is addressing the immediate need in our community. So there are some resources also that are being shared in the chat. So there are some great scenario planning toolkits that Mary Beth shared. There's a link there. Also the board discussion guide that they've provided there for some great information. So the tools that are there are available for you so that you can take them and help you in your flexibility and help you to quickly address what those needs are. What's great is that sometimes you know what needs to be communicated, and having a toolkit or having that information is there so that you don't have to start from the beginning and try to create it all by yourself. What I really appreciate and like about having templates and toolkits to support us is that then I don't have to start at the beginning, and maybe I can take that and I can say, this is perfect, this entire thing is going to work. But if there's an aspect to it, maybe that piece isn't going to work, but I know now how I do want to approach it. That tool is still very valuable to me because it helped me kind of visualize how to use it and approach any changes for our budget leaders or the governing body and things like that in the organization. So I do love a good toolkit and appreciate them immensely when they are available. So thank you for putting those in the chat. Okay. I also thought not to address something that's not very positive, but just to be a little realistic in today's environment with funding terminations. I did want to share, Ryan and I thought it would be helpful to share the Uniform Guidance Regulation that does talk about funding terminations. So this is not the full regulation. What I would say is, of course, there is more to Regulation 340, but just a few things for us to remember. This is the regulation that is explaining to us, the non-federal entity, right, the recipients and the subrecipients, what is supposed to happen for us. I do know, and we have received, agencies have shared with us that this is not always what's happening. However, the regulation does state that the federal award could be terminated in part or in whole. And it does list here in subpart A the 4 different conditions under which it could be terminated. So of course it makes sense that if we're not complying with the terms and conditions, that might happen. That could lead to a termination. It could also be mutual consent. We may decide that we are no longer going to provide the program that is being funded by the federal award. It could be also that we receive or we provide, written notification for the reason of our termination. So we've decided to terminate it, or it could be terminated by the awarding agency in accordance with terms and conditions, including, to the extent that it's authorized by law, or if the award no longer effectuates the program goals or the agency priorities. So this is one of the items that is listed here in the regulation. Again, there is more to it. But when we receive those notices, if that is occurring, there should be more guidance around letting us know and communicating to what our next steps are in that instance in case. All right. What we thought would be helpful is when we're looking at budgets and forecasting, because that is that's one of the most significant planning tools, financial planning tools, and program as well. But on the finance side, one of the most significant finance tools we have is the budget and the forecasting capabilities, right? When we're preparing that budget, of course, we know why we need to budget because we're not new to this realm, are we? But when we put together a budget, this is our financial plan. This is what we had thought we were going to do with the funds that were coming in. With every program, this is how we had determined we are going to spend and incur these costs to provide services to this many people in our community, and it's going to cost X number of dollars. And then here's how much we need from our funders to support that program. And then we plan on that revenue as it comes in. So we are putting together our grant budgets, we're putting together our program for the whole program budget, and then we're putting together department budgets, and then the agency-wide budget as well. So it really is that financial roadmap for where we were planning to go for the next 12, 36, 60 months, right? And it also gives your governing body in the management team the opportunity to set the short-term and long-term direction of the organization. And that is really helpful and critical for us to plan that out so that we have a plan in place. I like using analogies, and I think this is a great one where we've probably all commonly seen a roadmap, like we're taking a trip and where do we want to go? I am not a person who can just jump in the car and say, we'll figure it out on the way. I need to know where we are stopping at the end of every day. I need to know where we're going to end up at the end. I'm okay taking a detour every once in a while, but for the most part, I don't want to wing it, right? So this is your plan and for how you're going to take that trip in a way. Now, the benefits of an entity-wide budget, because I do know that many organizations, it can be kind of challenging to put together all these various budgets because they don't all align with your fiscal year. That could be a good thing or a negative, good or bad. I think it depends. Do we really want all of our grants to end on the same date as our fiscal year? Or are we willing to say we're budgeting for 3 months of one grant, the grant end, and then the next 9 months of that 12-month period is going to be the beginning of the next grant. So we have multiple budget periods and dates that we're working with. All budgets that have to roll up to the program or the service that we're offering, and then all of those need to roll into the agency-wide budget. And it can be kind of challenging to kind of coordinate all of that, especially when we're doing scenarios or forecasting and trying to determine the what ifs and the whatabouts, right? But with that entity-wide budget, that really is going to help you plan across all of your programs and activities. That's your holistic view and helps to make sure that the organization as a whole, your assets and resources are properly allocated to help your organization align with the organization's goals and the mission statement. It also helps with the financial controls of the organization. So consolidating all of that information into one budget really helps us maintain better financial control over those key assets of our organization. That includes monitoring expenses, looking at cash flow, making sure we're complying, right? It helps with improved decision making because, pardon me, I keep doing that. It also helps us look at the whole agency for decision making, which if we are leading a program, think about your program leaders, though they're really focused on a program and that service line. But when we have that agency-wide budget, that is helping us look at the entity as a whole. So that helps provide transparency and accountability for the whole organization. And that level, that holistic view tends to happen in the finance department and with the finance committee. So that is where you're really looking at everything from the overview. So there's a lot of course, key benefits to that. And then we can't talk about finances and grants without talking about compliance and regulation still. So that entity-wide budget is helping you with your understand what do the federal regulations say? What are the funding requirements? How is cost allocation affecting all of these programs? If we have unrestricted or discretionary money, how are we allocating those funds to the various programs to help them with any budget shortfalls? What is our process and our policy to do that, right? And also, we're required to have an entity-wide budget because that's one of the org standards that we follow. And for internal controls and financial reporting, it is something that we are to have. So when we're looking at budget to actual reporting, of course, we know what some of these key benefits are, and it's helping us control that, but how control expenses. But what about forecasting? So this, the regulation doesn't provide a specific definition for forecasting. So in general, it's just the process of kind of estimating what the future financial performance is going to be based on your historical data or the current data that's occurring. So as your fiscal year progresses, then you're combining what you know about what your future months you're expecting, and that's combined with what has already occurred, right? The actual from your past months. So it's combining your budgets with your actual results to help you project and plan forward so that we know it looks like we're going to run out of grant money in month 11, not month 12, or it looks like we're going to have money left over if we keep operating at the same, speed or projection. We have an opportunity to reallocate that to a different cost category. Ideally, also, your forecast is going to be a live document so that it is constantly updated and it's synchronizing with your current financial data so that it stays up to date, so that, again, you've got that real-time information to make those quick decisions so that you can adjust. And with a budget, those tend to be a little bit more static. We don't always make adjustments to those. Sometimes we do, but we don't always. When we put them in place, they tend to remain in place for a good period of time, and we don't really make adjustments till the end. But the forecasting piece is where we're doing those end of the period adjustments or evaluation, at least, to see how can we address these differences that we are seeing. So it really helps keep people up to date and more informed in a timely manner. So comparing the two, again, budgets are fixed. It's your financial plan. There is not a lot of flexibility with a budget, and it doesn't adapt very easily to your changing environment or needs. But forecasts, especially dynamic forecasts. So what do we mean by dynamic forecasts? It means that they're dynamic. Now, it means that they quickly can change and adapt for you. And that tends to come from, if I was to maybe oversimplify it, the dynamic aspect of that comes from the tool that you use to do your forecasting. If we think about how we do our forecasts, if they're easy to update and easy to change, that means they're dynamic. They're more real time, right? So if that's an oversimplification, Ryan he might be able to provide a different perspective on that, but that's kind of how I explain it. But it really depends then on how flexible they are and your tool that you're using to do that. But we want to be able to quickly update them and change them so that we can adjust as soon as more information comes in, because we're getting information on a monthly, daily, hourly basis sometimes, aren't we? So when we have a budget, so we have that static document, that static information, is there a way to kind of transform it and make it into a forecast? Well, there is, and these are some general steps. You may have a process to do this already, and if you have different steps or they're in a little different order, completely okay. That just means if you're not sure how to do that, this might be a way to help you make that transition, or take your static budget and then use that to develop a forecast. So of course, we need to gather information, and that's going to be your historical data. So that includes maybe your past expenditures, your past actual numbers, expenses and revenue, and then looking at that to help you see, are there any patterns or key drivers there that can help us when we're doing the projections. And then with that, when we identify key variables, that means what are the things that impact your finances? So grants, right? Our funding, program costs, so salaries and wages, employees, the number of positions that we have available to provide services, economic conditions, the political environment, things like that. Those might be some key variables. So if we're estimating income from grants and donations, our projected costs then, like those are going to be our salaries and our supplies. Assumptions are our hypotheticals. Those might be key variables as well. What are the assumptions? So when we're thinking about the whatabouts or the what ifs, what if we lose this one local grant? How does that affect our match? Things like that, right? So you're developing your forecasting model then by using that information. So now this might include a variety of simple spreadsheets to more complex or dynamic financial software. But the goal here then is to build a flexible tool that you can easily update for information. And then once you have those forecasts, ideally you're going to be able to kind of merge that with your real-time data so that you can see those real-time changes or up-to-date information. And then also put a process in place to regularly review and update your forecasts so that you can revisit them as frequently as you need to, really depending on how the situations or your variables that you're looking at, how frequently they might change, or if new variables come up that you need to monitor. So after you do that, of course, then communicating the information. Who needs to be informed of those scenarios or the new forecast or when a forecast has changed? Probably your budget leaders, yes, your program and service managers, your board of directors, to let them know and stay up to date. So have a process in place then as well, of course, for how you're going to communicate that information and let them know what's happening. So I'm sure you might be thinking, that's great. That sounds awesome, Catherine, but then how do we do that? You're telling me we got to put together a spreadsheet. Well, maybe. When we're developing that, again, it could be, we could be going from a spreadsheet, a series of spreadsheets that we're using. We all, good or bad, we all use spreadsheets because it is a very common foundational tool to our systems even. So could you use a spreadsheet? Sure, you could. But consider what's going to work best for you. So what's going to help you better automate your process? What's available for you right now? What's going to help you do budget to actual reporting and do the scenario planning? So if we lose one grant or if we lose the last 10% of our grants, so now we've got a 10% decrease. So those what ifs and those different types of scenarios that you need to evaluate and look at. And then you also need something that's going to help you customize and scale it as well. So there are ways to do that. And I think what we've got here is we do have a couple of examples. One would be either a spreadsheet, but there is a pretty, I think in the essence of time, one of the things that we could show you is a system, a budgeting and forecasting system that could be pretty dynamic. Ryan, would you be able to maybe share that and walk through?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. I'll take over and send a request to share my screen here. And get that going. So Catherine mentioned some spreadsheets, and I also saw in the chat, the NCAP toolkit for the various scenario planning. There are various spreadsheet templates that you can go download in the financial section of that scenario or the scenario planning toolkit. And one of them that I took a look at here, I downloaded a lot of several of them just to take a look at them. This one does a pretty good job of looking at what a scenario A would be and a scenario B would be, and then in this case, a best case and a worst case type of scenario there. As Catherine mentioned, spreadsheets tend to be very manual, a lot of importing, exporting, copying data back and forth. And so another way to do that, should you choose, is looking at a tool, a budgeting and forecasting tool, the one that we see a lot of organizations starting to lean towards more so than others, or just looking for a more sophisticated process, is a tool called Martis. This tool, it allows you to, depending on what accounting application you might have today, allows you to synchronize budgets that you already have set up in your accounting system and import it here, or you can always just bring over, a budget spreadsheet that you might have and play with the data here. But it allows you to import those budgets and export them back out into your accounting system, so you eliminate some of that manual error that you get from spreadsheets and such, and just efficiency gains. So one of the areas, Catherine did mention is just really just dashboards in general, looking at, what are budget to actuals, where are my sources of revenue / income to my organization, what are my top expenses. You can see all that right here, and you can play around with this in some of the various forecasting tools too. So what might this look like down the road? So in the planner section of Martis, I can go into forecasts and I can create a new forecast from a previous or pre-existing budget that I've imported then from my financial system. In this case, it's just Sage Intacct, and we can call this scenario B. Getting super creative there. And we're going to just do a what if analysis. And we'll just plan for 2 separate scenarios here, but you can do, I think, up to 11 different scenarios inside of the Martis tool. And you can click on these various checkboxes that I'm clicking right now are various ways to, I guess, associate that budget to different categories, or they'll call them dimensions here. And I'll just pull in an existing budget here and click on preview. So that then loads in my prior budget into this forecasting tool. And now inside of here, I can go through line item by line item and check, all right, this could be changed by a certain percentage or a flat amount inside of here. Or I could click the whole scenario, say this is an entire situation where all of my entries in here would be affected by a particular percentage. So you can go individual line items in here or all of them and say, all right, this would be a 10% reduction. And click apply. And you'll see what your current budget is then, what that adjusted amount would be that would be decreased by that 10%, and then what your remaining budget amount would be by that 10%. So this gives you scenario 1 or 2. In this one, I'll just do more of one, let's say 20% on this one. And so now that kind of carries over and it's like, all right, that's cool to do. And this is all it's doing it automatically for me as just a couple clicks. And then down here, I can go to results. And once I get to results, then I can compare them all side by side there. The whole way down. And then if I wanted to, I could take this and import a particular back into, or import it back into my accounting system, export it to an Excel spreadsheet, or anything like that that I needed to do. And now have a conversation with people, display it to individuals or whatever I might need. So that's one way to go through and do, or another way to go through and do some of the forecasting pieces. And as we kind of go through back and forth all the time, we'll see more and more getting mentioned. That is everybody okay seeing my screen? I got a couple people, one individual mentioning that they can't see the screen.
I can see it.
Okay. I'll make sure, maybe I was just going a little too fast because it does load, it's loading a lot of information at one time when I do that. But now if I wanted to go back into forecasts, there's, scenario B that we created. I could create another forecast, go back in and modify this one based upon, hey, we saw something new in the news today. And that scenario where it was 10% now could be 5% or could be 30% or whatever it might be. You can come right back in here and adjust that to whatever you think makes sense. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions from anybody else around this particular tool. And if not, I'll pass it back to Catherine to round it out.
Yes, I wanted to also share that with this, what's helpful, and Ryan, you maybe I missed it, but you can do your scenarios based on particular programs. You could do it based on specific grants, right? Depending on what you're selecting. So you have a lot of flexibility. And this integrates with different softwares. Ryan mentioned Intacct, but I believe this also integrates with Blackbaud, NetSuite, MIP, QuickBooks. So there's a lot of flexibility with the integration so that it syncs then every day and pulls in your actual numbers. So you've got those real-time numbers, and then you can synchronize back with your financial system to run your budget to actuals and those reportings right out of your accounting software. So we're kind of talking about the forecasting piece here, but it is a budgeting tool as well to support that process.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far into the budgeting piece because just due to time, but the way that the budgeting module works is you can assign people particular tasks within a budget. So that's in this area here. It takes a minute to load in these worksheets. So you can have particular worksheets sent out to different departments or grant individuals that are part of different grants and have them fill out that budget information and then have it roll back up to either a particular division budget or an organization-wide budget. And there are some nuances here and there for scenarios where you might have a grant that goes over, overlaps with your fiscal year, but it's certainly doable to handle all of that with inside of here. And to really do that, just hit add worksheet, pick out, some of the areas inside of here, create an owner, and you can have multiple levels of approvals here as well. So I'll just say, it's only one level of approval and, I approve whatever Catherine creates. I'd click add worksheet. It would notify Catherine to fill it out. I would then approve whatever Catherine provided to me. And then maybe if somebody needed to approve something for me, I could add in another layer of approval here. And let's say April would be the approver of anything I did. And that kind of how that all rolls up. So question here in terms of the cost of Martis. The tool, depending on the size and how many users you want, is where that cost varies. I'd say most organizations that we're working with that choose to implement Martis have been around that $10,000 mark for that budgeting and forecasting tool. Other budgeting and forecasting tools that we've seen that other agencies have looked at are 3, 4, 5 times that much. So Martis is one of the most powerful budgeting tools for that bang for your buck from Wipfli's side of the house. I know $10,000 isn't pennies to anybody in this organization, but some of the efficiencies you gain from being able to use it may be justified for you and your organization. So I'll stop sharing there, and Catherine, I'll pass on back to you, and you can round out the rest of it.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Again, I think when we talk about the dynamic aspect of what we are needing in today's environment, and something that can be scalable to help support us in our work and our processes. I don't think I'm sharing my screen, pardon me. Something that's going to adjust quickly for us and help us with that process is pretty valuable. And then I always like the internal control piece. I like the ability to send a workflow through there. Is there another way? Could you do that same thing with other systems? Yes, you could. Could you do it through a manual workflow to make sure you're getting approvals? Of course you could. It's just another solution and tool that is something that might be helpful. I am assuming you can see my screen. I guess I can't really tell.
Yes, we can see your screen, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll just move through this pretty quick as we get to the end. I do want to make sure that we have time to address any questions that you might have. I put some print screens here in the slide deck so that when that's made available to you, you could still see what that might look like. Again, it can connect to your system and pull that in. You could also import your data into a spreadsheet and then set it up so that it will populate your file, your tab with your actuals for the month as well. There are a lot of pretty savvy people that know how to use pivot tables and lookups so that they can accumulate that information and do the same thing in your toolkit, like your workbook. Again, I am an accountant. I am not. I like Excel. So just consider what's going to work best for you in your organization so that you can have a more dynamic way to look at that information so you can do those scenarios. Okay, also then I know I mentioned and we talked a little bit about the board of directors, but I still want to make sure that yes, we are including them. They do play a key role in your budgeting process, so they're responsible for monitoring that management and senior leadership is preparing the budget. They provide final approval for the budget, and then they monitor the budget, the actual and forecast throughout the year to make sure it aligns with the strategic plan of the organization and that it is still focusing on the vision and mission of the organization. They should be reviewing it, the budget assumptions to see, do those make sense? Ask questions of management and then approve the budget as we mentioned already. And then throughout the year, just to see that it's keeping track of and in line with what was planned. And then if things are changing, that they're aware of what the changes are and how that is affecting the organization. So presenting to the board, then you're going to give them the agency-wide budget, summary of income and individual revenue sources, summary of expenses by broad category like salaries, contractual services, things like that. And then you could be providing, and many of you are, yes, providing program reporting as well. And then you could be providing comparative data. It does vary by organization, the information that they may need or want, but what we want to make sure is that they do have, sometimes I tease sometimes to say, if I give you a board report of 100 pages, am I being nice or am I being mean? And sometimes agencies ask, well, how much is enough? Well, make sure you understand the statutes and the regulations of the programs you're operating, because some of those are pretty specific around what you should be providing to the governing body and those making the decisions. So make sure you're complying with that. And then I always kind of lean a little bit more on, it's better to give them more than they need than not enough. Giving them a 3-page summary of information that's all dashboard information might not be enough for them to make the appropriate decisions for the organization. So we should be constantly asking them for, what is it that you need to know, especially with the finance committee, right? And then they're making decisions for your organization, so we do want them to have the right information so that they are comfortable with the decisions they're making and that we understand the decisions that they're making as well. And then this is just a list of information that might also be helpful information for them. Of course, we can give them dashboard reporting or pie graphs and charts and things like that. I like a good picture. If you give me a workbook, an Excel workbook that has worksheets and tabs and all full of columns and rows of numbers, I could understand it. But boy, if you summarize that and give it to me in a pie chart or a graph, that's going to be better and quicker for me to comprehend, right? You can quickly absorb that information. So do consider how we're giving the information, but then give them the detail if they need it as well. And then summarizing the strategic goals of the organization and how the connection between the current activity and that long-range plan that they put in place. All right, it looks like I just very generously left everybody 3 minutes. Add any additional comments to this? That's pretty good. I usually go over. So
Great job, Catherine. I do see a question in the chat about a one-page or other handy tool to help our board members. Where are those key places? What where are the key places in those financials to look at? Any helpful hints? I know we had a toolkit up on our website for the longest time. It may still be there to help board members read an audit and to know what the highlights are for an audit. But on those monthly financials, any key takeaways?
I would love to say, I'm going to give you the answer nobody
I
likes.
know.
It depends, right?
It depends.
Because I have worked with boards who receive the summary information, the pie charts, the pictures, and they want more. And it's pretty collective across the board. They want to see, sometimes they want to see the detail, not all the time. But then I've seen the other side of that as well. Oh, just give me a pie chart. We can't do that either, because then it's pretty easy to come back and say, that's not enough information for you to make the right decisions. So what I would say is stay in regular communication with the finance committee. They're the interpreter between accounting and the board, right? They're there to help interpret. So keep asking them, what do you need? We're restricted also by our systems. If we can't provide the reporting that they need in a timely manner and quickly generate that, it's going to be more challenging to do that, and maybe not as quick to give regular reports like those real-time budget to actuals. So we might need to give them in less frequent ways, right?
I've been seeing boards more specifically now looking for more of the real-time information and not last month's information, or even last week's information. So, that timely information has certainly been a trend across both Head Start and community action as of late, and understandably so.
Yeah, I think it's important to go into those board meetings, having your financials that you need to approve, that you've closed the month and all those pieces, but you really want to walk in with, what does it look like today? Because things can happen so quickly.
Yes. And we should always be saying, here's this metric or number or report, and here's what it means. And we should be repeating it. I am not a sit and get. You need to tell me more than once, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions that have come through the chat. We will, for folks, provide the recording and the slide deck to folks who've registered for today. So Catherine and Ryan, again, thank you so much for your expertise, your partnership, and your ongoing linkage to tools and resources. Is there anything that you've said, oh my goodness, I really wanted to say this? Any last call for takeaways?
Ryan, how about you? I'll let you
No.
talk.
No, I would just say, thank you to this group for putting in the energy and effort that you have over the last few months. I know not all of us get those thank yous, whether it's from your community members, your colleagues, the various partners across the nation. Just thank you for continuing to do what you do and keep putting in that work and that effort.
Mhm. Yes. I will say I always read your emails.
At least the ones
read
that come
your emails,
underneath my
Denise.
name. Other people are doing the heavy lifting. So on the team, we have a great team here at the partnership able to produce all of that.
Yes.
Special shout out here to Mary Beth as well and Terry Bearden for coordinating and pulling all these pieces together. So, well, with that, I will just say one takeaway with your board, especially no surprises on finances, no surprises, no surprises, no surprises. So I know you don't want to freak people out with rumors, but your board needs to know what possibly is coming down the pike. So you want to keep them abreast. Now is the time to have time on your board agendas for some robust conversations. Not this, your standard agendas might still be the agenda, but you need to build in time for some real conversation. Because finance is kind of where no pun intended, where the buck stops. So,
Yep. All
all
right.
right. Well, thank you again very much, Ryan and Catherine. I really appreciate you, and thank you everybody for being with us. And just thank you for everybody who's with us, because to take an hour out of your day today when everything else is piling on, it's a heavy load. So just thank you for everything you're doing out in the field, and just keep doing what you're doing. You're helping people and changing lives every day. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.